Today on the No Limit Leadership podcast, we explore why so many high performers burn out chasing goals they don't actually want. My guest, Shea Smith, an executive coach with Novus Global and former story producer in the entertainment industry, breaks down a powerful framework called Vision Gap Reality. If you've ever felt stuck in survival mode, overwhelmed by demands, or unsure how to reconnect with what you actually want, this conversation will challenge how you think about leadership, possibility, and what you're truly capable of. Welcome to the No Limits Leadership Podcast. We discuss ancient wisdom, real-world experiences, and the latest concepts on mastering leadership of self and others. If you're committed to maximizing your life and your impact on the world, you're home. Welcome to the No Limit Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Sean Patton. My guest today is Shea Smith. Shea is a coach with Novus Global and brings a unique leadership lens shaped by years working in the entertainment industry as a story producer, one of the most volatile and high-pressure environments you can be in. Through her work, Shea helps leaders and professionals navigate uncertainty, make bold decisions without having all the answers, and reconnect with vision when life feels maxed out or reactive. Her work sits at the intersection of responsibility, possibility, and personal leadership. And I'm excited to explore how we lead when the path forward isn't clear. Shea, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. This is going to be a good conversation.
So I know next to nothing about the entertainment industry, but I'm intrigued by it. So what is a story producer?
Story producer. So I worked in what is called a story department, quite literally a whole department dedicated to people's stories and whose stories we were telling on any given show. Some of the shows I worked on were competition cooking shows. Some were more documentary, docuseries style. And we had a whole department dedicated to crafting and really mining people's stories so that what shows up on screen is clear and it tells the arc that they wanted to tell about themselves. So it was a really fun position to be in because I got to really work with real people. And it was so interesting how often we got to really highlight things that people had either forgotten or just glossed over or didn't think that was very important. And then when you kind of shrink it down into something that can show up in an hour series or less, it actually seems a lot more impactful. So it's really fun.
Seems like such a powerful skill. I know one of the things I struggle with in communication, whether it's through this podcast format or speaking or working with a client, is taking that messiness and sort of distilling it down to like, what's the main point, right? Like, what's the through line? Like, how does this make sense, quickly? I'm curious, did you find that skill set useful as you shifted to more of a coaching lens and trying to like see, kind of get through the chaos of the big story to see what's really going on?
Oh, absolutely. I still use so many of the tools I had then now in the work that we do with clients and teams because we all have stories going on. There's stories we tell others about ourselves, how we want to look maybe, stories we tell ourselves. And so many times people are working with those stories without realizing that they're actually driving and putting them on a trajectory, whether they like it or not. And so with clients now, I mine for stories all the time. I'm constantly listening to people. What are they saying about themselves? What are they saying about the possibilities and what they're capable of? It's so critical to the work that we do to pay attention to the stories that people tell about themselves.
When you're working in those environments that are like high pressure and fast paced, what was leadership like in those spaces?
Entertainment is unique in a lot of ways. And I wonder if this isn't in other high pressure, high performance industries. The leaders in entertainment have a specific way, all of their performance is visible for the most part, right? You have your team, of course, there's behind the scenes things, and your success is measured by the public. Your success is measured by networks. Your success is measured in a way that can often create the experience of being on all the time because you're under fire. You are pressing against deadlines that seem impossible, yet you're doing it. And then you do it again and again and again. Leaders are leading more often than not more things than they can count, right? It's not just one show at a time and then you do the next, right? There's a lot of overlap. And I make up that happens in other industries too, but specifically for entertainment, I think the visibility piece is really, really deeply connected to it and why a lot of high performer leaders in that space burn out because they continue to push and press and they don't really have a space more often than not to be able to stop and think about what stories they're running, right? And what challenges they're facing, how to get better, a space that's safe enough to be honest about maybe they don't know how to do something yet. Maybe they have an impossible dream that they don't want to say out loud because then they're on the hook for it or someone's going to, ask for proof of concept all of a sudden. So it's very unique in that way.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it could be almost endemic of that maybe high-paced environment or high pressure, I'm thinking things like medical or legal, or maybe a founder who has, their sort of their hands in a lot of
Mhm,
places. When you see those leaders, and I know you work across industry, but
mhm.
with your background in entertainment and work with people in entertainment, how can we help those leaders, or what should they look for as terms of like leading indicators that maybe it's time for them to get a coach? They are running themselves, too ragged, because too often we hear about people just burning out, like health crisis, mental health crisis. You just have to like we just work until we have to, it's like we just shut it all off and go away somewhere else for a couple of years or something, instead of looking for those early leading indicators that action needs to be taken. What are some of those leading indicators?
I think noticing burnout is part of it, and not just noticing, but acknowledging if you are overstretched and overstimulated and overwhelmed. And not to say that that means you have to give up on what you're going for. I think it's important to not just accept that that is what it is. You get a choice in how you relate to it and a choice in what you want to create. And so the work that we do with meta performance, oftentimes we see people burning out because their vision is not too big, it is too small. And so we define vision as
Mm.
something, a picture of the future that produces passion. And in other words, what is going to be the thing that is worth it, that's worth the price of transformation and growth. So often we see leaders, especially in these high performing, high impact, high fast paced environments, pushing towards something that they don't actually want, right? Or it's not that next level. And so when push comes to
Mm.
shove, it's easy to just move the goalpost, right? Move the goal line, scale back, and then they're exhausted because they're working so hard for something they don't even actually want.
Yeah, when you find someone who's, I could picture, feeling sort of burnt out and not sure what it is, and then you come and talk to them about your vision isn't big enough,
Yeah.
that they could be
Yeah.
a
They're like,
little bit like,
great.
all right, here's the door. So
Exactly.
how do you approach that conversation?
Yeah. So one of our taglines, right, is that we help people get twice as much done in half the time with increased satisfaction. And we use that last part too, because we can get more done in less time and just like completely burn out, right? And that's not
Mm,
the whole point of it, right? The
mm.
whole point is to have that increased satisfaction. And so we really come around leaders to give them the tools to be able to do that, to use the stories that they are telling themselves to get out of their own way and equip them so that they can get more done in less time. Because again, the big thrilling vision are things that aren't just naturally going to happen. It's going to take some efforts and it's going to take some focus on that. And that's where we get to come in and really support so that you're not just going out there and winging it or, again, contributing to that burnout.
Yeah, what do you say to leaders when you work with them and they're struggling to resist the future, or thinking about the future, because they're sort of they're stuck in this reactive survival mode. There's too much stuff that has to get done right now. Like, how do we reframe their thinking around what they see as overwhelm, or if they're like, now's not the time. I need to get these things done, and then of course that list seems to never get complete. So, how do we pull people up a bit?
Yeah, I think it's having honest conversations with them and having that space to say, "Hey, look, let's slow it down." Right? It's not again just pushing through and just here's my reframe. Here's my three top 10, the three top three things to do, and then you're going to be fine. Right? It's really slowing down and seeing the person and be like, "Hey, what's actually going on? What is overwhelming about what you're looking at? Maybe it is timeline." Right? Maybe that there's a bunch of expectations put on you that you haven't agreed to fulfilling. Maybe you've been voluntold for things. No matter what it is, let's take a look at it. What's behind it? Because again, it's the things that are running behind the scenes that are often contributing to what experience we're creating for ourselves. So when we look at what we want to have happen, right, that vision that I referenced a minute ago, we also look at really what's your current reality. So if their current reality is they're overwhelmed, great. Let's take a look at that. Let's get you unstuck, right? And inevitably, one of the tools we use is called vision gap reality, right? Because we look at where your reality is right now, it's going to create a gap. If you aren't where you want to be today, let's look at that space in between, right? And we get to choose how we relate to that. We get to choose if we want to stay in that feeling of, well, I'm just overwhelmed and it is what it is, right? Is that what you want to be committed to? Most people don't want to stay stuck
Mm.
there, and we get to work through that.
Right. And what I'm hearing there is almost a default to at the effect of, like,
Mhm.
all the things are at
Yeah.
this gap is happening to me. And so now I'm at the effect of all these things that are happening. And almost this turns into this almost victim mentality. When I hear
Yeah.
you turn around, is how do we turn that event um, uh, the point of view, right? That worldview to say, no, you're making decisions, you're creating this gap, or you're in the gap. Like you get to choose how you approach this, and almost put people back in the driver's seat.
Yeah, we get to take that ownership, right? And so the idea that it all is just happening at you could be true, right? And what else could be true? That's a question I ask on repeat with people. It's like, what else could be true, right? And so often it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out, right? You have all the resource within you. It's slowing down, it's taking a look at it, and it's being in a space where someone's going to ask you questions that may not be in line with the story that you're telling yourself. So, like the example you were sharing is that, okay, well, if I have all these deadlines and all these things, I'm just overwhelmed. This is the only option. Right? Having someone come from the outside and say, maybe, right? Let's take a look at what else could be possible. And even if you were able to take more 1% more ownership, what could that look like? How could your trajectory change if you were empowered in your actions and what you wanted to create?
Yeah, let's map this out. You mentioned, vision and gap reality for where we are now, this vision we're trying to create down the road. And what I'm hearing you say is that it's first important that we need to craft vision
Mhm.
because without that clear vision, it does seem muddy, right? You're just
Yeah.
kind of reacting and doing stuff. And so can you kind of explain to me when we set up vision and then we identify reality and we identify that gap, like what does that process kind of look like?
I mean, it can be as simple as somebody listening right now, taking out a piece of paper, right? Or your notes app on your phone and writing down what you want to have happen this year, right? What do you want the end result to be? We talk a lot about like, what would you want to be celebrating come New Year's Eve this year, right? Just pick a time frame. Could be 6 months, could be a whole year, could be 5 years. That's less important than getting really clear on what you're actually going to happen. So if you're writing something down right now, just notice like, is it clear? Do you want more money, right? How will you know if you have more money, right? Is it just $1 more, right? It's $100,000 more, right? So getting really clear. And I know we laugh about that because it seems so obvious. And yet, so many of us are running around with visions or ideas of the future that are more just a hope and a wish, right? And we don't feel connected to it, or it doesn't feel like something we actually want. Maybe it's something that you feel like you should go after. Getting clear on that is so important because that becomes your North Star. So when we look at that, it can be as easy as like, what do you want to have happen? It can be, I do this with my kids as well, right? What do I want in my parenting this week? What's my vision for this week? What am I committed to this week? Right? It doesn't have to be your whole life. And I would invite you to include your whole life at some point, right? This is your life we're talking about. We want it to be thrilling. We want it to be something where you're not burning out. We want you to have a long life and a happy and excited, right? And what do you want to have happen? So we got to start there.
I find my own experience is without doing that exercise and like putting things down on paper, that I have this idealistic view of the future that I'm trying to create. And it's always in the future. And
Mhm.
so I'm never getting there
Mhm.
because it's a constantly moving goalpost. And I know for me, that can create sort of like almost like low level burnout or just
Mhm.
fatigue where it's like, I'm just always fighting for this thing, but not realizing that as I do that, as I accomplish things, I just keep moving this vision bigger and bigger. So it's like I
Yes,
never have the thing that I'm trying to get to. And that could be exhausting.
absolutely. And I think the vagueness is where we see that, right? And it's not necessarily that you can't expand further than the goals and the outcomes that you set for yourself. And it is amazing what happens when we hit those outcomes and then you go to set your next ones, how much bigger those next ones are. And again, not just big for the sake of being big, right? We look at what feels impossible that you actually want to have happen. And from there, setting that big vision, I find people can either vision really easily, maybe that's their default. And sometimes that's more difficult. The second part of this tool is to look at your current reality. So if you wrote down that vision, if you're listening and you're working alongside us here, go down further underneath that vision, right where you are right now. Now, this part is somewhere that we often can get a little sideways from what is actual reality. So I would invite you to get really crystal clear on what your reality is. Oftentimes we see people inflate this area and be like, well, I'm kind of almost kind of going, right? And then that can create exhaustion if you don't get really clear on where you're starting. Cause then if you're trying to get to that big vision and you're just kind of muddy from the get go, again, it's going to start slowing you down.
Yeah. So I'm hearing clarity on vision and current reality. Super important to sort of like know what you're playing with, know what's important, know what you're focusing on. And then, it's funny, even as I just related back to as I gave my example about the vision keeping to move and staying vague and always being aspirational. I came back to you said earlier about how I was relating to that gap. Like I
Yeah.
was relating to that gap as it's tiring, it's exhausting, it's never gonna happen. And so yeah, I just kind of caught myself there of how I was relating to not having vision. I was seen as a negative thing.
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. Because then we get to judge ourselves, right? Our brains, more than anything, want to be right. And so it starts to look for evidence. So if you have a vague vision and you're not meeting whatever your vision is, I want more of insert whatever, then you get to be right that you're not going to get there. If that's the story you're telling yourself, right?
Mm.
Our brain looks for evidence. And so it's another reason why we want to get specific about where we want to head, right? And you're allowed to change your mind. This isn't about you just have to craft this and then just believe it and it will be so. We start with vision so that we go to a strategy piece and a mindset piece. We have a direction and you're not just going to zigzag all over the place. And that's part of how we get more done in less time, is having a straight route to where we want to go. And knowing is the starting point of that. Knowing what direction you want to head.
Yeah. How have you found that most people, if we can use that term, or clients when you first start working them, do people sort of typically relate to this gap when they see it, when they start to get clarity on it?
I think there's a mix. There's often just that sometimes that excitement because maybe it's the first time they've really tapped into it. I get a lot of tears. I get a lot of people crying in their coaching sessions because they're like, well, what if I am capable? Right? How exciting and thrilling and potentially terrifying is that? Right? Oftentimes when they get to that vision that they've created, they see their current reality, they see where they are now and that gap in between where they are now and where they want to go, and fear sets in. No, what have I done? Now I've put it on paper, right? Maybe that's somebody is experiencing that right now that's listening. It doesn't have to be the commitment if you want to change your mind about what that vision is. And what if you held that line? What if you worked towards that outcome and you actually got it? And so with that gap, we get to look at how we want to relate to it. Like you said earlier, do you want to operate from that fear, that disempowered side of it, where the fear, the anxiety, the stress, the now I have to, I'm never going to, we hear a lot of absolute language, right? It's never, it's always a lot of vague language in there. And we also, if we're going to take ownership, get to choose if we want to be empowered and relate to it with love, right? Getting curious about what we're capable of and what is possible, right? We call it loving the gap because we get to have that ongoing experience because your vision, if it is thrilling and feels impossible, is likely not going to happen tomorrow or the next day, right? If you're pushing for that 6-month outcome, that year end outcome, it's going to take a bit, right? And if it is like the training that we do, if it is something that feels impossible, that you're going to have to show up in a different way, it's going to take some growth, which comes from growing pains, right? And so we get to
Mhm.
wrestle with that tension or to love that excitement of staying empowered towards that gap.
I love that word empowered when it comes to the gap. And you also brought up two other words. You brought up fear and love, which I think
Mhm.
are sort of the critical drivers of all human behavior. And I think it's empowering to be able to know we can choose to be, we can still do the thing. Like we can still do the thing and do
Yeah.
the action. It's like, do you want to do it from a place that you feel the energy to come from a place of fear and lack, or do you need to, or can you maybe approach it from one that swells up from loving being in the gap and great. The word that keeps coming for me is gratitude. For me, that
Mhm.
sort of like grounds me into loving the gap. Isn't it cool that I get to do this? I'm like striving towards something that's important. Like, isn't that
Right. And I think there's also probably a layer of this for a leader that's listening, and maybe they're in just such an intense environment, whether they like their job or not, might not be relevant to them at the moment, right? They might thought, oh, it doesn't matter, but
cool?
my boss needs this and this. And I don't love that I have all these deadlines, right? And if you slow it down for a minute, what could be possible there, right? If you got curious, what resource could you pull on to operate from that love, right? I think there's oftentimes a stuckness feeling to some of the jobs, especially with leaders, especially I experience it in entertainment. I make up it's in other industries as well, where it's just like, this is high pressure and that's it, right? And this type of work, this meta performance work, we get to look at not just like, how are you going to handle it? How are you just going to show up and do your job? We don't even ask like, how are you going to be the best? We go further beyond high performance to look at what are you capable of. And so even in this one tool where we're talking about loving a gap, loving the space in between where you are right now and where you want to be, getting so clear that you are not yet where you want to be, right? And then choosing to respond with love and care for yourself and curiosity and excitement, right? That can be challenging, which is why we really encourage people to have a coach to whether that's coaching you or your team. We liken the coaching space to a gym. And so as a coach, we get to spot you with this. We don't recommend that you go alone. Even in our coaching firm, we don't go alone. We all have coaches. We go together on activities and different things. We invite each other into this space because you matter, right? Because we don't want you hanging on a limb by yourself, and you deserve to have support, in my opinion, as you are growing in this area, because we're asking, people to step outside of what is feels comfortable, and we're not going to leave you hanging, right? You get outside of what feels comfortable so that you can fulfill what you are really capable of. And more often than not, that's more than you're doing right now.
So I love how you brought that just from individual leaders we're talking before to organizationally. And I wonder what this looks like applied, the vision, current reality, and then the gap, and creating strategy and choices off that. How does that look, or what can that look like maybe inside of an organization as a team?
Yeah, I think there's so much power in getting shared language when you are chasing after a big vision. And if you are working in an organization, most likely you don't want to stay exactly where you are now. Most likely you want to grow in some way, you want to expand in some way, you want to enhance team culture. Maybe you want to live out the values that are written on the wall in the lobby, right? And maybe that's the vision that
Mhm.
you have, and you have not yet fulfilled it in a way that feels meaningful or impactful. Whatever the vision of your company is, you may or may not have your team enrolled fully in it or aligned to it. Maybe there's changes happening. Entertainment is certainly facing a huge shift in how it operates. The rules of the game are changing, and that is happening in other industries I make up as well. And so coming in and either doing training and getting coaching, full on support, helping people align to their vision, getting really clear on where they are right now, which is, again, maybe there's not yet time, you haven't slowed down to look at where your company is, or maybe there's avoidance there. Maybe there's just a lot of people that work at your organization, right? No problem. We get to come in and simplify that process to get really clear on where you are so that you can create a strategy that will actually work for your company. We see teams, again, asking them what they are capable of, that set these big, thrilling outcomes that feel impossible. Annual, revenue that is, more than doubling what they've done before. And we are seeing not only are they hitting some of those goals, they can get further in the next quarter because they are growing and pushing and learning tools that are helping them get more done in less time with increased satisfaction. So they are reaching these, and they're able to keep their teams and their cultures aligned to the values that fit their company. So they're not losing people in the process.
Mm. Yeah, so I'm hearing that, enrolling people and making it a team practice, and then also understanding or having each team member maybe explore what their individual vision is for their role inside the team, and then finding some sort of alignment there to really engage is important. And I'm also hearing that the key here seems to be like slowing down, like taking time to slow down.
I think it's getting clear, right? I think that's what
Mm.
slowing down allows us to do. And a leader listening to this may be thinking, great, but I don't have time to slow down. And what if this shift is what propels you and your organization forward faster than you could have ever imagined, right? And what if you weren't just getting to the next level, but your entire team was? What if you got roadblocks out of your way and your entire team was doing the same? That's the kind of shift that we see with organizations implementing this tool and other tools that we have. And the best part is that it's not just a magic one flash in the pan situation. We see this across organizations, throughout all of our clients, across multiple industries, individuals and teams. And one of my favorite parts is working with my clients with these tools is that they can also then go take them on their own and go implement them in their personal lives. So we see families changed, marriages changed, generations changed, right? There's so much more that gets to come from this just by simply being willing to get curious about what you were capable of.
You mentioned earlier with this about tackling a vision that seems impossible. We have, when we sort of start to put vision to the test a bit, we have some different things we're looking for. Can you maybe go through like, so how do we know we have vision?
Yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I'll share a couple, but I'm curious what you do too. Because
Okay.
I think, the first thing I ask is like, how doable does this sound? Right? How doable is this in your life? And even with all the pushing, people are like, well, I could probably do that, right? Like an 8 or 9 out of 10, no problem, right? And no problem. We get to come in and really push and spot as they go to that next level because our brains are brilliant. We are designed so incredibly well that our brains are trying to keep us safe. And so even those stretch goals that we set for ourselves without somebody from the outside coming in my opinion, is that we're going to stay safe because we believe we've got a story that's that may be impossible. And maybe for someone, the story could be, I shouldn't want more than this, or there's just no way I'm going to be able to do that. So I'm just going to stick to something that I know I can really, a game I can play, a game I can already win, right? Our brains are trying to keep us safe. And so we help people unlock what's behind that. So they not only can push to find out what they're actually excited about, but then what else in their life, right? And so that's the first thing I look up is I ask them, how doable do you think it is? And then I honestly
Mm.
ask like, hey, could you do this on your own? Great. If that's possible, no problem. And what would you want to have accomplished on that next level if you had support? What could that look like? So I'm curious what you look for.
Yeah, I think that I look exactly I look for. Well, here's what I see. I see either them playing people, and I say them like I don't do the exact same thing. I do the exact same thing.
Yep.
Actually, initially playing safe, right, and being like comfortable. And I think a lot of that also comes from everything you just mentioned, like the fear, not wanting to be wrong. I mean, I think even how we were conditioned in school, right? It's like, oh, you gotta, you missed 2 out of 100, or, like you're always searching for perfection, or like what matters is like the score on the test, not the
Yep.
effort. So it's just like,
Yes.
it's this obsession with outcome over process, I think, that makes especially high achievers that are used to you know, accomplishing the thing we set out to accomplish, and that we limit ourselves. And I limit myself. My number one driver that I've had to fight through in my own work the last few years has been the fear of failure, or probably more specifically, the fear of being seen as a failure.
Mm.
And that is something that with my first business, as it was, any outside observer would have been like, the numbers don't work. Like, this thing's not going to work. You need to pull. And I just kept going. And it was really about, hindsight 2020 now, doing self work 10 years later.
Sure.
I can see that it was the drive, it was my ego driving. And like, I literally would rather, have physically died than being my ego being seen as a failure to other people. And that drove me to the hospital. I
Hmm.
mean, appendix almost burst, stress hives. I mean, I'm sure that, the entrepreneurial world, the suicide rate is super high, stress level super high. I'm sure in the entertainment industry, the same thing. So that high pace thing, you just keep going, and you deconnect from yourself. And so that fear of failure is what I see first. So like a little deeper, but
Yeah.
like my own experience with that is like something I'm hyper aware of in this protection mechanism. And then when someone pushes me, my like rubber band reaction is to just like, well, then 100 times, screw it. Like if we're just putting numbers on the board, right?
Yeah.
Like let's just throw it on there. And as I look back and through my work in Novus Global, what I'm realizing is both avoidance strategies to actually put myself on the hook
Yes.
for vision, right?
That is so true. Like you said, I can say we see this all the time, but me also do this all the time, right? Well, fine. I'll just go fantasy land because then I don't have to fail and I don't have to be wrong because I know that I can't do that in 6 months. If I'm going to go try to run a marathon in a month, right? Having not been able to run around the block right now, right? That's not something that I feel on the hook for, or that's not something I feel bad about not accomplishing. It's also not something that I have as a vision because that's not thrilling to me to put in the time and the effort right now to go do that, right? And so again, coming back to like, what do you actually want? And what is a failure, right? What is failure in this scenario?
Mm,
Again, that comes back to the disempowered
mm,
lens that we get to play with, right? We often, people say what just reframe it, just flip it, right? And with the work that we do, we really get to get into it. Like you said, it gets deep and it gets really impactful because we are, like I said, we're working with real people. And that's the best part of our job is that we get to really help real people in teams. And I think what you just shared is something that probably resonates with a lot of people listening because we don't want to fail. And what if it wasn't failure if you missed that goal? What if you became the person who could do that thing and you accomplished it the next day after that 6 months, right? 6 months in one day, right? Is that a failure? Most people,
mm.
I make up, most people would say, no, that's still amazing if you did that. Yet we look at it for ourselves of, well, I didn't check it off, right? As high performers, right? Say, well, but I didn't do it exactly the second I said it, right? Or I didn't do the best or the most. And so getting really clear on what, again, going back to vision, we say this ad nauseum sometimes, right? What is the vision? What is the vision? What is the vision? Because it matters that much because it plays into how we talk to ourselves, how we get to be empowered or disempowered, how we get to relate to what's happening in our life and our world, right? And I think
Mm,
that when we start to get really clear and start looking at that, that's what makes the biggest difference for people. I mean, have you seen that in your
mm.
own life as you've done that work?
Yeah, 100%. And, the word that came up for me as you were just explaining that is focus.
Hmm.
Like that's what is in a world that is increasingly adapt and at stealing attention and trying to pull us away and try to get us to think about a million different things. And whether that's news or marketing or, you know, I should be doing these things with my family, or this whole like shoulding on myself, which is one of my
Hmm.
favorite things to do, is just
Hmm.
should on myself. I should be here. And so as like what vision provides is when I often find myself scattered or feeling overwhelmed. To your point, vision allows me to refocus and
Hmm.
almost make it add clarity around what actually matters.
Yeah. And I think for people who maybe are multi passionate or maybe they have a side hustle in their corporate job or whatever variation, right? If your vision is in just one area, right? I invite you to expand like your viewpoint, right? As you were saying these different things where, it doesn't matter right now. Maybe your vision has multiple, points running. Maybe you have a vision for different things in your life. And that's no problem. You get to use it, like you said, as a focal point, that North Star, and to test, hey, I'm making this decision, or I feel really overwhelmed about this, particular task or event or what have you, opportunity even. But if it doesn't align with the vision, I make up that decision on whether you engage in those other things becomes a little bit simpler. If it's not matched towards the direction
Mhm.
you want to go, it almost makes the no's easier sometimes, right? If you know what you're saying yes to or want to have it be your yes.
And don't you what I see that with myself and others, that when we lose sight of that, or if people haven't, or either for that moment or ever had like that clear vision, how much easier it is to get pulled and say yes to things and overcommit and do that. And I'm going through a phase of my life where, because vision has shifted, I'm having to sort of recalibrate past commitments
Mhm.
I've made. So
Yeah.
like, are these now aligned with my new vision as I
Mhm.
get to shift that over time?
Yeah, I personally have a tendency to go all or nothing. And so when my vision has shifted
Mm.
as well, where it creates some tension because it's like, oh, I would just want to drop all this other stuff. And my vision to finish well supersedes that. And so I'm showing up differently and I'm have a gap that I get to choose to love. And how do I do things that are no longer aligned, but I'm finishing those commitments well, right, into this next season. And I experienced that working in entertainment as well, where we'd have show after show after show, a lot of turnover in just what the projects are and getting enrolled. A lot of muscle building in this world of how do we bring a team together? How do we get the vision of what the actual product's going to be? How do we, herd cats? All the different things that people experience in their workplace today, I'm sure, is really how do we get to the finish line? And so without burning out for me looks like playing with that middle ground of how do I show up just day after day, that the athlete mindset of showing up consistently doing the work. And with a clear vision, I get to experience different results. With choosing to be empowered about my gap and loving the gap, I get to experience results that I never thought were possible before.
To go back, 'cause I just had something came up for me there with the entertainment industry again. Have you found that maybe this is not true, or maybe it is true, but on different teams and in different environments, does it have a tendency to get to a point where like people get very siloed? Like, these are the creatives who came up, like you guys came up with the storyline. Everyone else is just kind of like, do your role, uh, and kind of get pushed out of the creative process to the point where people sort of just like head down, do their jobs? Or do you find where it becomes more of a back and forth and like everyone's participating in the creative process?
That depends on the team. And I would say that we have an opportunity to get creative wherever we are. And so I get
Mm.
creative in my parenting, right? I get creative in how I balance parenting and work, right? I get to get creative. And that's part of, for me, the part of being empowered and loving my gap is really like, okay, I have a part to play in this. I have parameters, much like many people listening, right? You don't just get the run a show on every project you work with in your life forever, right? What and for me, that would be boring, right? To be the only person working on anything.
Mhm.
And I make up for even people listening now, there's this opportunity to look at again the ownership piece of what is my vision for what I have in front of me, what's on my plate, what have I agreed to, and what do I want to create? What value do I want to create in this experience? And more often than not, on a team in entertainment, I'm one piece of the puzzle. And that's by design because I'm not going to do the tech job and run the camera and act and direct. That's not how a team works. There's teams for reasons. And so to have all of these different people in place is how the magic happened. And if I were to go back and coach myself, I would take more ownership on what I was creating versus just reacting to what was just thrown at me. And I saw in my life for a number of years, and I'm working on now, is how do I build a life that I want to live? How do I produce that versus just reacting? Again, I didn't have vision for a very long time. I didn't have an idea or an intention of even what I wanted other than make more money or get a better job or more work life balance, like all these things that sound great or we can put on a bumper sticker. And I wasn't getting there. I was just letting life happen at me and thought, well, it is what it is. Right. And so that's where I get creative. That's where I get to do my work is how do we get teams to a spot where they feel creative, taking ownership and clear on what they want to create.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's funny. I was just going to ask about the outcomes of the team when you find vision, and I think you would sort of like answered that question preemptively with you talked about like the energy and like the feel the sense of creativity that you had when you started finding vision. How would you mentioned that for so many years you were in this reactive. Did you know you were in a reactive mode? Like was that or was it a
I didn't
realization one of those things like you don't know until you're out of it or
Yeah, I think part of it was, being in my 20s, right? So we're just kind of
yeah.
wandering through life, right? And not just to shame myself about being in my 20s at some point, but just really looking at hindsight now having the language. That's why I was so exhausted. That's why I was so frustrated. That's why I felt so overwhelmed. I wasn't taking any ownership or very little at best. I took ownership of getting a job, right? I showed up to be able to have the skills and be hireable and I could do good work. Again, that all or nothing, start and stop. And so that middle ground of how do I want to do I want to make an impact on my team, right? How do I want to lead? How do I want to manage? How do I want to be experienced as a supervisor? And now having this work in this language, I can see so clearly like, oh, that's why this wasn't working. That's why I wasn't getting the result, even in those relational visions, those goals, right? Or getting hired on the next show, all those different elements that I couldn't explain. Why isn't this working? Why is just everyone else is getting the jobs and I'm not? Or whatever other disempowered language I want to shout out at myself, right? And we experience that on teams, right? Like when we talk about, like you said, the energy is different. I think, we've all been in conversations with someone who it just you leave and you're just drained, right? That disempowerment is almost contagious, like just complaining and that the venting, no problem. But like, at some point it starts to just drain. And so I experienced that. I contributed to that. And that was a result of me just being like, well, I just have to deal with what deal the hand I've been given.
Shay, is so great. I guess on closing, we've talked a lot about vision. We've talked a lot about like why, how to relate to it. And if someone's listening to this and they're like, I think I got it, but I kind of like you said that whole like busy thing. What would you tell them? Like, what's on the other side of this type of clarity?
Yeah, I think if you have something in your mind right now thinking, man, I'm really curious about that. I don't know. Maybe what if that could be me? I wonder if I'm the unicorn that it wouldn't work for. If you're asking yourself any of these questions or more, like, I really want this thing. I don't even want to say it out loud. It's time to have a conversation. It's time to come talk to
Mm.
Sean. It's time to get somebody to spot you in this because you are capable of immeasurably more, especially if you're already thinking like, what is that going to be? And you feel that almost that unsettled feeling. You're right. You are right. You are capable of more. You are capable of achieving thrilling, impossible outcomes. You are capable of being a leader that has a team that actually enjoys their work. You are capable of change. You are capable of changing your experience and we are here to help you. There's so much support for you. There are people that love helping you with this. And, whenever you're ready and before you're ready, really come have a conversation with Sean because we just see lives change. I know it's an easy thing to say and to point to and, go have a conversation, and we mean it. This work is worth it. It is worth the pain it was worth growing pains. And we've seen it in
Mm.
the individual level, like I said, the personal levels, the team levels, organization. And the whole point of this for me is the stories that you're putting out there in the world, the change that you're creating, the impact that you want to have with your company, with your life, with the experience that you were living, right? I think the world needs that. And if you're burned out and overwhelmed and about ready to quit, like we're going to miss out. And I don't want to miss out and I don't want you to miss out. So feel very strongly about this.
No, I love the passion. What I'm hearing is, I have my own opinion that because of the gratitude that I have to be alive in this place, in this time, and knowing in my speech I give on stages right now, I use this point that 100 billion humans have walked the earth. Like there's been 100 billion other people, and look what they have built for us, right? Through immense struggles and suffering. And so I look at it, if you look at it through that lens, I feel a strong sense of moral obligation to chase greatness, to chase what I'm capable of, to maximize impact out of just a reverence for life itself.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
So I feel like between the two of us, the people are fired up right now. Like I feel like
I
we
hope
did our job.
so. I hope so. Let's go.
Let's
Man, you got a
go.
big life to live. Let's do it.
Absolutely. Shay, this has been awesome. We'll obviously put all your links and everything in the show notes. But if there's like one place, if someone's trying to get to Shay right now or find out what you're about, what you're putting out in the world, like what's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, come over to LinkedIn. I'm Shea Smith. I'm also on Instagram, the Shea Smith. There's kind of a lot of Shea Smith. So look for us, look for Novus Global, and we'll be there ready to go.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time, Shay. This has been great.
Thanks so much, Sean.
Thanks for being a part of the No Limit Leadership family. This isn't just a podcast. We're building a movement of no limit leaders driven to unlock our greatness and lead the world forward. If this made you think or gave you something useful, please, 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 right now, go hit follow and then share it with one leader you believe in. Challenge limits, develop leaders, fuel greatness.